the David Bowie
Easy.
of football.
He physically has that about him. He's the thin white duke of the football pitch.
He's arguably the most famous Dutchman, I'd say, of the 20th century. But he's kind of seen, Mark, as he straight away as the shining light of these batch of players that are going to come through playing a very specific way.
He clearly is in a very fashionable street. He's got a flowery shirt on. He's holding up a pair of the most perfect top-of-toe shoes. Yeah, because I don't know if I could tell you what position he played in the strictest sense. I picture him holding the left-hand side of the pitch.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to another episode of If You Know Your History with me, Johnny Owen.
And I'm Mark Webster, and If You Know Your History, of course, is a wonderful football chant that is sung across many football clubs and tells our story perfectly, doesn't it, John?
It absolutely does, because we take a deep dive into the history of the beautiful game. Social history, cultural history, all kinds of history involved with football.
Indeed, this particular person that we're going to be talking about now covers so many of those bases, which is quite frightening, actually, of how impressive he is in the world of football. But not only that, successful pop star and the purveyor of some of the finest shoes you've ever seen.
Yes, indeed. Also, a good argument of saying the most important person in football history. What I qualify with that is, I think nobody has ever been at such a top-class player in the top five ever, but also in the top five managers ever.
Yeah, the crossover is incredible. It's Johan Cruyff.
Johan Cruyff.
Okay, I'm going to let you go with that one there. But of course, that actually isn't how he started life, did he, with Johan as a first name?
No, he didn't. Henrik.
That's
right. I think it's interesting as well because we do this thing, me and Mark, where we talk about footballers as pop stars, and we always totally agreed that Johan Cruyff, or Henrik, is the David Bowie of football.
He physically has that about him. He's the thin white duke of the football pitch.
Yes.
He doesn't look like an athlete.
No, looks like a rock star.
He smoked as much as Bowie did. This is for sure.
Had similar teeth.
Yes, exactly. Not perfect.
No.
The hair, long and fashionable, and arguably ill-kept, much like the very early David Bowie.
Yeah.
And as you say, he's become that enigma, I think.
Effortlessly cool, I'd say.
Totally. I mean, to the point where his name still exists now. I mean, there's still a Cruyff fashion range that you can get out there. So that his name sells everything. And, of course, we won't be dealing with it in this particular episode because there's too much of Cruyff's life. But as you say, the non-playing version of this, arguably, he's the man who gave us modern football.
Absolutely. Well, we're calling this a Cruyff's early turn.
Correct.
Like we've done there.
Because he's a Dutch kid.
Yes, we're going to talk about his early years. We're going to start with a question, as we always do, because people like this, and we're going to answer this by the end. But we're going to ask you, why did Johan Cruyff wear number 14, which is very unusual at the time?
Totally. I mean, when I'm watching him, it went 1 to 11, then you had some 12s.
Yes.
Not really until things went international did the number go above 12 in football.
No, it didn't.
And yet here he is, and he makes 14 as big as 23 and Michael Jordan is in terms of the world of football. Yeah. But don't know why. So looking forward to finding out.
I was in Amsterdam a few years back, and there are giant sort of 14s.
Really?
Wherever you go, and it's amazing. And obviously, he's on the side of the trams there, and it's just got 4. Always because 14 is it's seen as his number.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's an amazing. I mean, his impact, as we will talk about now, on Dutch history in the 20th century is huge. He's arguably the most famous Dutchman, I'd say, of the 20th century.
Yep, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody you think of who's been sort of like a famous rock star. I mean, people are going to... Golden Earring, the only Dutch band I can think of. Radar Love, was it?
Golden Earring will crop up in conversation because he did have this hit record that I talk about in 2 different countries.
He did.
And Golden Earring were an international success and tied by the fella that worked with it, but I'll tell you about that later.
And he's all tied into stuff like the sort of cultural rise of Amsterdam as a city. Ajax, the football team, are kind of seen as a focal point of that, the 60s. Men and women of their time, it's sort of perfectly, they resonate, don't they, in the sort of the cultural sort of impact.
Yeah, because he doesn't arrive into a already perfectly built Ajax Amsterdam footballing city and club, does he?
No.
It kind of evolves with him.
It does. I mean, we need to start really with the Second World War, and certainly, in Dutch history, they had this dreadful thing that happened in 1944, where obviously the Allies had got into Northern Europe, but then the winter arrived. The Germans counterattacked in what's known as the Battle of the Bulge. Holland kind of got caught on this. We all know in Britain the story of Bridge Too Far, where we tried to take bridges, over and tried to get the war over by Christmas. It didn't work, and therefore there was this awful sort of like stalemate in a horrible winter. And the Dutch people, they call it the sort of the Great Starvation. People died of starvation in Holland. It was really caught in the jaws of these two enemies fighting one another, and that country had it really tough in that winter. And the scars of that. Cruyff is born.
He's born basically as in the embers of that, isn't he?
He is. A country completely destroyed after the Second World War, in no infrastructure, lack of investment, and he grew up really in that era of the Marshall Plan, Mark, where the first investment starts. You get Dutch infrastructure, you get the railway lines, and there's slowly a sort of coming back to life in the 50s. And he's this young boy, he's surrounded by all this, he knows his history, and he's just obsessed with football. And again, this fascinates people when you say this. The Dutch have no real heritage or history of football.
No.
I mean, the Austrians have, for argument's sake, in the 30s.
Quite.
The Hungarians, very famously, but there's no idea that Holland would suddenly become what it is today, seen as a place of football culture and progression and great managers and great players. That just doesn't exist.
It exists in the reason that Cruyff exists, because that's the generation that starts to give it to us,
Absolutely
isn't it?
right.
I mean, the influences do come from outside, as we'll talk about, but do you think it was a massively important thing for him, given the environment in which he was born and therefore had to grow up, that effectively he grew up in the area where Ajax Amsterdam, the football club, existed? It's that district of Amsterdam, isn't it?
No doubt about it. He grows up in the shadow of the stadium, famously. His father dies when he's quite young. His mother remarries the groundsman for Ajax,
right?
Famously, who brings him up apparently, and they're very close. Cruyff is very close to his father, and he has he talks about a morbid fixation that his father died in his 50s, and this belief that he was going to die young as well. He talks about it all the time.
Wow.
But this chap who's this groundsman, he notices that Cruyff is absolutely obsessed with football. All the cliches, goes to bed with the ball, plays it, from morning till dusk, and is allowed in his class, I've never heard this before, to have it under his desk.
No.
The teachers let him do it.
Do you reckon he's doing keepy uppies under there?
Yeah, that's what they say. He's sort of constantly playing with this ball under the desk.
So he's basically kind of dribbling the ball between his 2 feet and studying
exactly.
at the same time.
Yes, that's exactly.
This would seem to make sense about the Cruyff the man,
And I think there's a touch of the Georgie Best in this, where there's that amazing photograph of Georgie Best at like 18 months when he's shaping over a football and he looks like he's 24 taking a shot. And I think Wayne Rooney had this, where from a really young age, people are going, Bobby Charlton's the other one, from like 5 and 6 years of age, they're going, this boy is special with the ball. Yeah. He just looks like a footballer. And Johan Cruyff had that. He is seen from a very young age as somebody with an extraordinary talent. And he's one of those people, which I love, he knew it.
Yes.
So he knows. So that, I think the famous Dutch arrogance in football, it kind of starts here with Johan Cruyff going, I am really good.
Which is great, because, of course, there's no guarantee that even though that he's got that connection, or arguably, it could have gone missing if it hadn't have been for the happen chance, the unfortunate accident of his dad dying, the occurrence, but the fact that he had the in at the ground, because there's no guarantee they're going to get picked up, is there?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are sort of like certain worlds coming together, which is really important, the moving parts. We'll talk about it a bit later on. Rinus Michels. We've actually got...
See, I was going to...
How do you say it?
You're doing really well.
Yeah.
What, Rinus Michels?
How do you say it?
Rinus Michels, yeah? Okay. No?
I'm going to go with...
I obviously, you had me at Johan Cruyff. I'm not doing that noise.
I'm going to go with somebody who played underneath him. I'm going to go with John Metgod. Should we see what
you might know.
Okay, let's go.
Hi, I'm John Metgod. And this is how you say Rinus Michels. Rinus Michels.
Rinus Michels.
I like that he says how you're going to say it and then says it. So he basically underlined the point beautifully there.
Yes.
And John Metgod is just John Metgod then, yeah?
He's the John Metgod. He played with Johan Cruyff.
Played for Holland.
No
flashy pronunciation.
No. Oh, John Metgod is just John Metgod. He's not John Metgod. He's John Metgod. But it's Rinus Michels.
I like him. He puts us to shame. He patently speaks better than two English-speaking persons about this. Can I just take us back to the start? Because we're going to mention a guy in a minute that's a big influence on him, and there is no influence in Amsterdam in terms of footballers, but it's probably worth pointing out that in terms of pronunciation, where we go Ajax and Ajax, or Ajax, as many of us did of my generation, as you would do. And there's a logic to that now. Rotterdam's team was Sparta.
Yeah.
Ajax was a Trojan god, or a god who actually was a person who fought in the Trojan Wars and is famously the cousin of Achilles. Oh. So if anyone ever got an Achilles injury playing for Ajax, they're really doubling down on the mythology,
on the Greek mythology,
of the whole thing. But of course, isn't that weird? Perhaps not weird. It's probably not even a coincidence. Is that Rotterdam went down that route in terms of the inspiration for the club name. And so clearly this kind of emerging team in Amsterdam, which happened in 1900, they've gone the same route. So we've now got Ajax, I believe so.
I'm trying to think in England. I mean, you had the Corinthians, didn't you? Who were a famous amateur team.
Quite.
I mean, but there's nobody with a Greek kind of attached name in the sort of modern game, is it, in Britain?
Not that, unless, I don't know, was Falkirk in the Trojan Wars? I don't think it was.
I do know that the Romanic names for the countries in what we call Britain now have become football teams. Hibernian is obviously Ireland.
Yep.
Caledonia, Scotland, Inverness, Caledonia. Cambria was Wales, is a Cambrian team that play in the Welsh leagues, and in England is Albion.
Albion is the big one.
Yeah.
Albion
so there's a few there, but no Greek. Interestingly, there's no Greek names other than Corinthians. So
exactly.
There we go.
So this is on that point. Then we'll pick up on obviously the story of him being inside the club is massive.
Yeah.
But the guy that gets in there, or part of the inspiration, his hero is a bloke who played for Sparta Rotterdam, who's Fas Wilkes, or Fas Wilkes probably.
Yeah.
Now, there seems to be two strong reasons that he was a big influence. Number one, wizarded the dribble.
Right.
Used to like to run with the ball.
Okay.
Something that Johan Cruyff was not too shabby at himself as well. But also only the fourth Dutchman to pursue his career outside of the country.
Okay.
And so he goes abroad and ends up at places like Inter Milan, Torino and Valencia. So immediately, as a kind of, for young Johan as a role model, number one, Fas plays like that. And number two, Fas says, do you know what? I'm going to chance my arm in somewhere somewhat more sunnier climes.
Rather than
and did rather well as a result of that as well. So this is all now come together to form the young Johan, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's in the Ajax youth system, isn't he, at this point? Rinus Michels becomes really important. Good footballer himself.
Yes.
Could play. But he gets interested in coaching, doesn't he, Michels? And becomes sort of seen as the master of what later became total football. A name still used this very day. Like the most famous way of playing football, I argue, in the 70s, going into the 80s. And we'll talk about that and what kind of sort of, what was invented to try and, I suppose, beat it, to compensate the way that they play the Dutch. But in the middle of all this, obviously is Rinus Michels, and his player quickly becomes Johan Cruyff. He's picked quite young in the early 60s for the Dutch team. There's a great photograph of him as sort of like a young boy with a slick back hair, very serious-faced. But he's kind of seen, Mark, as he straight away as the shining light of these batch of players that are going to come through playing a very specific way.
So this bit that stays, this is Bowie.
Yeah.
When he was still a mod, before he had the perm and went into the
Gospel Mannish Boys.
Yes, exactly. And the Gospel according to the Tony Day, and even before Space Odyssey. So this is the version of Cruyff we're looking at, and they look incredibly similar as teenage men.
Yeah, they do, don't
with like mod haircuts.
They do.
It's worth mentioning as well. You mentioned obviously that Michels is the man who invents Ajax as a football club, and we'll talk about that in the second half. But it's an Englishman, or certainly a Brit, who invents total football.
Yeah.
A fella called Jack Reynolds comes over very early on in the proceedings. He was coaching in St Gallen, which is in Switzerland. He played for glamorous teams like Grimsby and Watford, the natural breeding ground for where you'd expect total football to be. He starts coaching at the age of 30. He nearly gets to coach Germany in the Olympics in 1916, but something obviously prevailed that wasn't Olympics that was going to take place. But he ends up becoming the manager there, and it's him that brings the notion of total football to Ajax as a football club. And then, as you say, from that point forward, it is then bred into them, and it's their DNA.
Yeah, Michels always, in all credit to him, always talks about Jack Reynolds.
Right.
He's the massive influence on the philosophy of Ajax. Michel obviously expands it, develops it. Michels famously sort of is the guy behind 4-3-3, so we can all blame him for we don't play 4-4-2 anymore. There's arguments to say that he's the man behind the false nine, which was Cruyff. Not quite the traditional number 9, so the one that would play more on the turn. He also, interestingly enough, people forget this, he was the expert at the offside trap.
Was he?
Oh, that Holland team were very good.
Killed the game.
There we go.
Killed football.
Nobody wants to talk about this. But what he was absolutely certain was that during the mid to late 60s, the way that they developed football under Michels, the way that every player could interchange, the idea is that anybody can play any position,
right.
You're interchangeable, and it was all about space. So basically, once you receive the ball, you try to make space as quickly as you possibly could for the player that passed you the ball. And Cruyff, to the very end of his days, was obsessed by this.
Yeah, because I don't know if I could tell you what position he played in the strictest sense. I picture him holding the left-hand side of the pitch.
Yeah.
But that's not. But of course, that's not the way it always worked with him.
This is interesting. They developed a team that could play around him.
Yeah.
I mean, to use something very similar, in 2016 with Wales and Gareth Bale, which I watched, the Welsh team was literally developed to play around Gareth Bale's strengths.
Yes.
That was it.
And strangely enough, the comparison I could think of in the modern version of this would have been when John Barnes ends up at Liverpool.
Yeah.
And Barnsley obviously is a guy that would also could play as a strict left winger, but anywhere else on the field.
Free rein.
And you would take the ball to John Barnes, seemed to be a bit of a thing.
Free rein. And what's really interesting at this point, Mark, is obviously in the mid-60s, there's the great Inter Milan team under Herrera, who'd, the Catenaccio, which is the way that the defensive way that the Italians played football. And it was a really interesting, the translation means more, in English it actually doesn't even just mean a bolt, it means like the bolt is rusted on. So
it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's an extra thing.
Right.
So that's what it means in Italian. A rusty bolt on something. Catenaccio. And that way of playing. I mean, we have to point out that Celtic beat them in 67.
Right.
But mostly Inter Milan won the European Cups and with the force. And Herrera's way of playing was seen as almost impossible to play against.
The great thing, of course, about Ajax coming through with Cruyff, and we'll talk about the other guys in a minute, is that this is a late period in the 60s when Amsterdam as a city is taking on its own pop cultural position of being possibly the go-to place in Europe.
This is what's wonderful about this podcast. We can talk about these things. It's not just Ajax, the team on the pitch. It's Amsterdam off the pitch as well.
Yeah.
60s Amsterdam is now seen, probably right up there with swinging London, as the place for the philosophy of the 60s. Bands, you've got the legalisation of marijuana, the whole idea of sort of the sexual revolution. It's all happening in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And in the middle of it is a football team that play in kind of the same way. They've got this rock star looking guy up front. Also, his great friend Nayskins looks magnificent. So there's all these things, this cultural coming together.
Well, as well we know, John, this may or may not remain, porn looked like it was Scandinavian and probably was.
I mean,
most of the fellas in porn films looked like they might have been total footballers.
Yes, people are laughing now, but did somebody order a pizza? Did somebody order a pizza? That was the cliched thing, wasn't it? And Amsterdam absolutely had that reputation along with Scandinavia and Holland.
So this is absolutely the perfect team for the perfect city at this stage, isn't it?
Couldn't agree more. They're sexy.
They are.
And the top is sexy. We talk about this. It's one of the great kits in football.
Yeah.
Everything about them is attractive.
Barely mess with it ever, have
No.
they?
And they shouldn't.
Why would you? How could you? There's one that came out just recently, as we sit here speaking, which is a kind of 125th anniversary version of it.
Yeah.
And I think they put an extra button on.
Yes. Yes.
They might have moved the badge.
You can't mess with perfection, can you?
No.
And
that's what
there's no point even trying. So by the late 60s, the Dutch team started to win. Interestingly enough, they aren't the first Dutch team to win the European Cup. Feyenoord win it, don't they? They beat Celtic in the final. But for them, for 3 years after that.
Right.
So four years running, Dutch teams win the European Cup. So they're seen as kind of like the pinnacle of football. And everybody else in Europe is going, we need to start playing football like that.
Yeah.
They're seen as being progressive. They're changing football. Like I said, they've beaten the Italians now. Catenaccio is sort of like I said in the past. Forget the Italians, they're gone. Not true. We've got to find out what happens there. The Italians always work out a way of coming back. That's what they do. They're amazing. But Rinus Michels, he's known as the General. His very famous saying was that football is war.
Yep.
He always said, I never actually said that. But his idea is the football is a permanently evolving state where you're always trying to fight off people that are always trying to be better than you, and you've got to be constantly progressing. Amazing way of thinking this. You know what
It is, but I guess it lends itself to the fact that he's a strategist. I mean, this is the big deal, isn't it, about the way he does his thing?
No, I mean, I think what you've got to remember about Michels at this time, he's not just a manager of a team. He's got a player there that is the physical manifestation of him on the pitch.
Yeah.
He's got that dream situation. And I think it has happened in times where you have the player that totally understands your philosophy and is you on the football pitch. When you get that, you've got a great chance in football, I think.
Indeed. Listen, I reckon second half of our conversation about the young Johan Cruyff, obviously we get to talk about him and that football team he's in. I wonder what band they were. We can have a conversation about that. But also, of course, this fella who then turns himself into a mini industry.
Yes, he does. I mean, he's like all that cultural stuff where he is like a rock star. He's got a clothing range. He's got shoes. You love that photograph of him. I mean, if you could Google it, just Google it. If you just Google Johan Cruyff with his shoes. And what was the name of his shop he had?
Right. He owned a shop, and you've got to look at the picture. First of all, it's because it is now David Bowie. From that period just before we get Ziggy Stardust, when he's kind of got long hair. And in fact, I think it's the cover of one of the covers of Hunky Dory is when he's in the dress when he has got long hair. This is that Johan Cruyff.
Good.
And he clearly is in a very fashionable street. He's holding up, he's got a flowery shirt on. He's holding up a pair of the most perfect topper-toe shoes. Did you call them toppers in Wales at all? The kind of clown. Yeah, exactly. Every region has its own name.
Penny loafers.
Exactly.
All those kind of names, isn't it?
And it was called Shoutique. But of course it did. It wasn't a sports shop. This man was selling the most fashionable shoes of 1969.
Yeah.
And he happened to be probably at that stage top 3 player on the planet, if not higher.
Yeah.
If not higher.
Well, I mean, there's precedent. Georgie Best has opened a boutique with Mike Summerby.
Yeah.
Edwardia, something called Edwardia.
That's right. He was going for that Freddie Fronted affair.
Sort of slightly Austin Powers sort of thing, isn't it?
Jack Charlton had a very austere gentleman's clothes shop, didn't he?
Did he? I love Jack Charlton.
I think it might be called Dress Like Your Granddad. I mean, it probably wasn't, but that's kind of what it appeared to be.
Although, in all fairness, there's an amazing photograph, we always say about it, of Bobby Moore and Jimmy Greaves together with Yul Brynner. And they are sharp.
They're at Pinewood Studios because Sean Connery's in the shot as well. Right. So there's a bond being made.
That's right.
And they both are, as you say, you could literally cut a piece of paper in half with the crease in their trousers.
Oh, sensational.
Your Brynner looks particularly good because he looks like he's got hiking kit on it. Perhaps he's up a fake Alp somewhere in his film.
So they are very mod at that point, right? You know, it's like the detail is done. See, Cruyff, you're right, is slightly Bowie. He's slightly more hippie-esque. He's heading more towards flowers, again, Netherlands, Hollands.
Yes.
So he is slightly more, the collars are longer, the hair is a bit longer. Cruyff is very much on that sort of like...
Grown into himself.
Yes.
Slight problem.
Go on.
We reference him as being this multicultural individual.
Yeah.
We know he's a great footballer. He's iconic to look at. He's got a wonderful shoe shop. He puts a record out.
I bet it's magnificent. I can imagine.
Stinks, John.
Oh no! I was hoping for some psychedelic journey, like a 10 minutes of wah wah.
Oh, that would have been great, wouldn't it? Basically, 17 minutes of introduction.
Yeah.
And then him sort of singing some kind of mantra.
Yeah, like a sort of like a Dutch cream.
No.
No.
It goes, oi, 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 ba-da-ba-doo. It's
Johan, no!
It's the worst Eurovision Song Contest entry song that was never a Eurovision Song Contest entry song. It is an absolute...
Are we allowed to play it?
Stinker. Peter Koelwyn, who was the father of Dutch rock and roll, he had his own band called The Rockets, and wrote for Golden Earring, your favourite Dutch band of all time.
Yeah.
He produced the thing, and apparently Johan's not very good at singing, so he had to have a couple of drinks. Now, if you hear the record, he didn't have enough drinks. He's awful. But it's oi, oi, oi is translated loosely as oh, 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 yet another blow. That's the... And because the song, obviously, is about a fella who goes to watch his cousin boxing, who loses. He then goes to the pub with his cousin, who's then shortchanged in the pub. And then he goes home with his cousin, where his wife berates him for coming home having lost money in the pub. This is what Oi is all about. It's a terrible, terrible record. It went top 20 in Holland. And Yeah. It's still in Holland then, obviously. It's one of the Netherlands' greatest hits ever. But it was re-released very successfully in Spain.
Was it? When he went there?
When he went there.
No way.
So they had to hear it too.
Oh, look.
What?
It's the halftime orange. We must be ready. Halftime, Mark. What are you doing? Do you want a cup of tea as well?
Take a break, shall we? Yeah, I'm joining you.
Okay, so the answer to the question, Mark, that I asked at the start of the show.
Because it's, as you pointed out, John, and I didn't know this, is that it's everywhere around Amsterdam, 14.
14.
But it was never a football number.
No, and it's a really simple answer to it.
Oh.
So basically, he's injured for a few games, and he usually plays number 9. And Gary Muren, trying to say that right, who's the brother of Arnold Muren.
Right.
Later of Ipswich
Famously,
fame.
yes.
He's playing in the 9 shirt. And Cruyff, obviously, goes to give it to Cruyff, and Cruyff goes, it's okay. He's kind of cool guy, isn't he? He's just like, he's David Bowie. And he goes, you're all right, Gary, you keep it. And he goes, you sure? And he goes, yeah. And he picks up a top and happens to put on a number 14, and it becomes his number.
Probably the first time we are seeing in a starting 11 a number that's not 1 to 11.
Absolutely.
How about that?
Well, I mean, of course, he famously gets sponsored by Puma at this time. The kit, the Dutch kit,
yes.
the Netherlands kit, the Holland kit is Adidas. He famously takes a stripe off. So there's only 2.
Cheeky.
Yeah.
So, and gets unceremoniously removed from the squad?
No. He's Johan Cruyff. What are you going to say? You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, fair enough. Exactly. How many stripes do you want to? Would you like an extra stripe? We can fix it. Don't you worry. That whole time now, we are talking about him as the leader of a band. On which point? Which band? Ooh.
Which band are Ajax?
Which band are Ajax?
I'd say, what about Led Zeppelin? Playing football, new style, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, looks
like
great.
It.
Yes, because I would, there we are. If I was making a film, now you got me excited, I would cut the promo to Whole Lotta Love. I need Kool-Aid. See, that would be that team for me.
See, I'm glad that you went that route, you as the filmmaker, because unfortunately I've got late Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, because they look a bit like that, because they've got long, terrible hair.
Yeah.
But okay, I also went Basically Rollers in my head.
But
I'm glad I never said that out loud.
No.
Oh, I just did.
Led Zeppelin.
There you go. They are.
Are we having that?
I'll give you them. I love this whole group because this is, I guess, this is kind of like the teenage me getting to really see after Mexico '70 when we did get to see the great Brazil side.
Greatest team ever, quickly.
Oh, in my head,
yummy.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
And obviously when Pelé,
greatest international team ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you see Pelé hugging Bobby Moore at the end of it, of course that comes straight home to me with no problem at all. But then I think we all start to get aware of European football more. Yeah. We're probably seeing it a lot more.
Yes.
And what we're seeing a lot of is the Dutch winning. And then what we're really seeing a lot of is Ajax becoming the leaders of the pack.
Yes.
For every reason that you mentioned. Number 1, that shirt. Number 2, the fact that they're winning all the trophies. You get to, even on the international level, I mean, there's the 74 and losing to Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, in Germany, so I suppose fair enough.
But we could talk about
that. But that was nearly going to be the perfect moment, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it was all gearing up to that moment.
Yeah.
I think something really important happens in 1970 as well, is that Ajax play against Racing Club Hemesdi, but they say RCH, thank God.
Oh, okay.
So they play this game, and there's a player playing for them by the name of Johan Neeskens.
Yes.
Rinus Michels looks at this kid and goes, he can play, and he signs him for Ajax. And famously, there's a really famous thing there, he comes in Neeskens to literally make Johan Cruyff better. He's there in the team.
He sees him as sort of like the final piece of the jigsaw.
Final piece of the jigsaw.
Wow.
And Neeskens' whole career is almost, I'm going to make sure that I allow, because he's a fantastic midfielder, a great, brilliant, skillful player himself, but to make my job is to give the ball to Johan so that he can sort of create his magic.
And he's the guy who makes that work. Wow. And of course, I mean, that becomes the story. I mean,
because they win the European Cup the following year. 71.
yeah, this is it, exactly. They go on and beat Inter Milan, don't they? 2-0. Cruyff gets both the goals.
Who did they beat in the final, Mark?
Oh.
And who were they managed by? Panathinaikos were managed by the great Puskas.
Yeah.
In Wembley in 71, with that magnificent, remember that green shirt?
The
with the big
just
shamrock.
Glorious green
Yes.
with exactly. And of course, oh, the irony, the man who himself was seen as being
The Cruyff of his era.
of football
Absolutely.
is coming up against this,
galloping major.
the young pretenders.
We will definitely be doing something on the great
getting there
mighty
on them.
Magyars, yeah.
Also other names from that particular team that are now, they're associated forever,
Yeah.
beyond this. Ruud Krol and Ari Hahn.
Yeah.
Another two fine members of Ajax Zeppelin.
Johnny Rep, who did Rep play
Johnny
for?
Rep, he was in there later, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Ruud Krol and Ari Hahn. Perhaps it was a result of losing to Germany. Disenchanted with football? No, they carried on because they went on to manage about 100 teams between them, as did the Dutch. But
Naskins is forever the assistant manager of the Dutch national team.
You don't let these fellas out the game, do you?
No.
But what they did do, I'm going to say, is a complete revolution to get it out of their system. Opened a little sandwich shop in Amsterdam, or more to the point, on the Regular Brisa Strata in 1974. If it wasn't called Total Snacks, they have not thought this one through properly. But basically, Ruud Krol, Ari
Total
Hahn's...
Snacks.
It's got to be. Isn't it? But they were forever in now my mind linked
To the
as
thing.
being the sandwich.
But
bar
you know,
guys.
people did forget Rinus Michels. He was the manager when they won the Euros in '88.
That's still a rap, right? Yes.
So
that's still a rap.
his effect on Dutch football, Rinus Michels, is astonishing. Because he was obviously the manager of Ajax and he was manager of the Dutch national team a few times, I believe. But these people had enormous influence over decades. Obviously, we're going to do another episode on Cruyff and the way he, it's completely revolutionised football with Barcelona after as a manager and with this, with the youth setup very much based on the youth setup in Ajax. But the World Cup final in '74 is massively interesting, Mark, because they play a German team. They are not just the hot favourites. Everybody wants them to win.
Right.
Very similar to what happened in '54 with Hungary and Germany.
Right.
What do the Germans always do? Just know how to win those games.
Yes.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you think that great German team of Beckenbauer and Muller, great side, Bertie Vogts, they were a good team. But they scored in the first minute.
Yeah.
And it was an English referee gave the penalty.
Jack Taylor, wasn't it?
Right, in the very first minute. So my first ever memory as a kid, and my brother was talking about it, and my older brother was, I can remember watching a television screen and just a flash of the orange and the white. I must have been about 4 years old. But I remember everybody sitting around a television watching this thing. That's my first ever memory.
And it's amazing that Jack Taylor is a name that is such an important factor.
In that thing.
Because you're right, what was happening here, we were meant to be crowning the future of football.
Yeah.
Even though we were going to have to crown them in Munich, which would have been, what an achievement that would have been.
Yeah.
It was close, but no cigar for them.
Germany won 2-1. Jack Taylor was a butcher from Wolverhampton. Isn't that fantastic?
Well, he certainly butchered that cup final.
So that was a big moment where everybody expected Holland to win. It was a procession, very similar, like I said, to Hungary when I think Hungary beat Germany in '54, something like 8-1 in the early rounds, and then lost in the final.
Right.
But that was the miracle of Bern, where they studied boots and all that kind of stuff. So Adidas does a big part of that story. But this in Munich, as you said, was a brilliant German team going. We're gonna upset history here.
We've got this lead. We're going to hang on to this.
And Germany, that'll be another episode in itself. Obviously, we were talking about it the other day, Mark Mino, possibly Beckenbauer is the other person that had a similar effect to Cruyff.
In terms of from schoolboy to his party.
Yes, what he's done for his country, for changing what he did for his team. Very similar roles, he Mr. Ajax, Mr. Bayern Munich, as a player, but also as a sort of like a president, philosophy, style, same with Barcelona. Two very similar men, really. And talking about that, I have to check on that. I wonder if they got on. But that wonderful clip you were talking about where Maradona as an older man is walking down that stand, the stairs, and Cruyff just leans over and taps him on the shoulder. and they embrace, and you just go, "Oh my goodness, it's Maradona."
Do you know,
and Cruyff.
that's Sistine Chapel with
Yeah.
the touching of the fingers, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Good Lord.
I know, and they just embraced, don't they? It's a lovely moment.
Which rock star's Franz Beckenbauer?
Do
Do you know what he looks like in my head to me? Hugh Cornwall from the Stranglers in Vintage. Hugh Cornwall from the Stranglers time. But that's probably not the right guy for that particular job there.
I'm just thinking of would they be? Oh, again, a huge influence on the game. What's the famous German band, Autobahn? What are they called?
Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
Member of Kraftwerk.
Is Kraftwerk him, Muller, Waltz? Is
Nice.
that them?
Exactly. That's right.
That this electronic music's going to change everything.
Exactly. And indeed,
Efficiency, we get it done.
and invent hip hop in the process.
Absolutely.
That's so the Kaiser.
There we go.
That would be. We started at the very top of this one, John, discussing rock and roll and football and putting these two together. We've got our Bowie moment, which of course is Johan Cruyff.
Yes.
But you found a fantastic piece of information, which sees Johan leaving Ajax and leaving Dutch football, which in itself was a strange move, wasn't it?
It was, because what happened was he kind of he does this thing. They used to say this about Clough and McMenemy, that these great Northeast managers, took their great football knowledge to places like Nottingham, Derby and Southampton, and the Northeast went into a kind of decline.
Right.
It was tough years for Newcastle. So there's a great TV programme, they go, you took the missionary work to and you forgot about your homeland. And Cruyff was accused a little bit of this.
Yes.
He went to Spain and he changed Spanish football. People forget Spanish football was very physical. It was like, you got kicked about. And he went to Barcelona. And let's check this out. Ajax tried to sell him. He didn't want to go. He was signed with a long contract to Real Madrid. And I love this rock and roll sort of style of him. He said, if you're going to try and sign me to Real Madrid against my wishes, I'm going to Barcelona.
Yes. Because, do you know what? And that's great, because in my head, he becomes another Galactico.
Absolutely.
And they've had a few of them, and they'll have a few more.
Yeah.
So he becomes part of a parcel.
Yeah.
Barcelona, he gets to go there and
become
again,
arguably their
it's
most
reboot.
famous. Yeah. So he goes to Barcelona, where he becomes arguably the most important person at that football club since Patrick O'Connell, who's the Irishman that really did set Barcelona up and the whole philosophy, who's from Ashington, which is the same pit village as Bobby and Jackie Charlton. He is the most important person in Barcelona's history. Pep Guardiola says this all the time. He changed the philosophy of the club and made them into this, European. But by the late sort of, noughties, they were astonishing, weren't they? That team with Messi and Iniesta and Biscuits. But what we found was, as he leaves Ajax...
Messi, Bruce Springsteen?
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen, we said this, didn't we?
I nicked that one off you. You said that. Because I've gone Ronaldo as Robbie Williams. And I think I might be doing him a disservice. And now you can ask me which one of them am I doing a disservice. But I won't go into that one particularly now, Yeah,
I did say Bruce Springsteen, because he had that late sort of career where he won the World Cup finally. A bit like Springsteen sort of had a later career. 73.
And both born to run.
Absolutely.
Carry on.
73. He sheds his skin. This is Johan Cruyff. He goes to Barcelona. Unthinkable. Leaves Ajax. Nobody ever expected it. He's the symbol of Holland, Amsterdam, and Ajax.
Yes.
This is their golden boy. And he's going to Spain. And he forever goes, I'm going to someone else. Literally, within the same 2 weeks, David Bowie killed Ziggy Stardust at the Hammersmith.
The last show we'll ever do, as he said.
Stardust. Johan Cruyff is no longer Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy played guitar.
And now he's gone to be the Thin White Duke for Barcelona.
Johan doesn't play Ajax. Amazing.
There you go.
So it's all true.
It's all true.
Johan Cruyff
is the
is
David Bowie.
This
has been If You Know Your History.
This
you
has.
get us on all kinds of platforms. Make sure you subscribe. Is that right, Mark?
You definitely subscribe, because it doesn't cost you anything to do it.
There we are. And it's all free as well. We hope you've enjoyed, and we shall speak to you soon.